welcome back to Vulnerability Weekly. Today we cover a quick update on the Uber incident that has happened on the 16th of September and with an update and an official confirmation on the 19th of September. Now, of recently, literally last week, the London City Police have arrested an attacker that is potentially could or could not be linked to the latest Uber incident. There is suspicion, especially after the arrest on September 22, that the attacker is potentially linked to the Lapsus group, that is a criminal organization that is particularly interesting and scary in a way for being linked to the more recent hacks, GTA 6 and few others that are difficult to combat because those attackers have a modus operandi that is linked to visibility and getting, if you want, famous. For now, there is no official statement that this is actually an attack linked to the Uber hack, and this arrest is actually haven't been confirmed. But just as a quick recap on the timeline, if you haven't followed the news, there is another update on the recent Uber hack where I go in detail on the full story. But just as a quick recap on what happened, fundamentally one threat actor that is potentially one of these attacker from Lapsus groups, still unconfirmed, has tried to authenticate through the VPN server that Uber use to access their own internal network. The VPN server had an SMS authentication or an authentication system that requires additional confirmation, and this is a secondary factor on a device. Specifically in this particular case was on a mobile device, and the IT worker, of course, as policy mandated, has been recently disclosed that this was a third party, refused most of the attempt to actually authenticate this request because it was unsolicited. He didn't request it, he didn't access. But then the attacker, using social engineering, that is a technique to actually convince that an attacker is there, that fundamentally of a good behavior of an attacker, phone up this IT worker from a third party company and convince him that it was an official support ticket and they were testing something from the backend of Uber, and that has convinced the IT worker to actually click authenticate, and that has led fundamentally the attacker into the network that give him access to fundamentally scan and sweep the network, and he was trying to identify vulnerable system, open shares, trying to map the network to see what was available. And luckily for him, he found a network share drive with a number of PowerShell scripts with embedded credential for a key vault. Now, a key vault is traditionally repository secured and authenticated of credential. Now, traditionally, these key vault have the keys of the kingdom and is better used if they're segmented. Now, most often than not, segmentation is not implemented as a best practice, and all the keys of the kingdoms are left there with authentication, so it wasn't completely unauthenticated. They were security best practice. The problem is the key to access this key vault was embedded in the PowerShell script. So once extrapolated this key, the attacker was able to access the key vault, and from there, fundamentally, the attacker had access to the majority of the system. So it compromised Active Directory credential, it compromised systems, it compromised internal file shares, it identified at a certain point of the attack chain. It's not entirely clear if it's on the key vault or outside. They the break glass credentials. That is fundamentally a last resort document that is used in a disaster recovery scenario to identify, to have access to the system in case IT support and the people that have access to traditional credential are unavailable. And with those credentials, they fundamentally had really access to all the keys of the kingdom. A compromised Slack server, a compromised HackerOne system. It identified through HackerOne, that is traditionally a platform that is used for bug bounty, so has all the vulnerability or the system that potentially could have vulnerability available for bug bounty provider, and the one that are actually have been discovered with vulnerability. So really, he had all the keys of the kingdom, and he went cocky enough. The person went cocky enough to actually declare that he was spamming the person, and to the point where he declared that I'm an attacker, I compromise your system. He went all the way to compromise even the security tool that enabled to monitor, and it fundamentally covered his tracks. So this was the update. Because of the entity of the attack, this was particularly damaging. There is still no official news from Uber, and they just are there to actually focus, fix, or let Uber be. I'm looking forward to see more detail on this story and what we can learn from the incident management and the current incident. This is everything for now. This is your host, Francesco. I hope this was useful. For this and more update, follow us at www.appsecphoenix.com. You can see all the latest vulnerability in Vulnerability Weekly.